all the work that you're doing. So we thank you for, spending your Saturday night with us tonight.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I'm looking forward to the questions.
Indeed, indeed. I kind of wanted to tackle just when you first kind of discovered the Haitian Revolution and what that kind of did to you. Was it when you were a kid, a little bit older, or when was it exactly that you discovered what our ancestors were able to accomplish, and how did that have an impact on you and the work that you're doing right now?
Ah, um, let me begin with this sound. You tell me, can you hear this sound?
Yes.
That's how I learned about the Haitian Revolution. That's the conch. My father is a voodooist, and he talked about the conch. Um, I don't know. Can I share screen?
Uh, Let me see.
No worries, no worries. So the first time,
I
I
just
can,
made you a host, so you could do it.
I could.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you seeing what I'm seeing?
Yes.
There you go. That's the famous Negmaron. The Negmaron of the Haitian Revolution. And we had that picture at home. And I asked my father, what was it about? And that was the first beginning of my knowledge of who and what that is. Negmaron. That's the famous Maroons. When you read Haitian history from folks, mostly they don't begin with the Maroons, but it's the Haitian Maroons that began the Haitian Revolution. And it is how I learned about the Haitian Revolution because of this famous picture and the conch.
Mm-hmm.
What that is that when the revolution started, the they used that sound to get all the plantation folks to know that it was time to begin. So that's very, very important. For those who don't know who I am, I run the Free Haiti movement, and our mentor is Haiti's founding father. You're looking at his picture there, Jean-Jacques Dessalines. So essentially, what I remember is that when I officially started learning the story, and I'm going to say Haiti because hate, the H, the way it's pronounced, is what the something that was changed during the occupation of Haiti.
Mm-hmm.
So I may say Haiti, but please always understand that sound is very important. That conch was the sound of creation, and Haitians have forgotten it. People go, there's a call there that goes beyond note, communicating with the plantation owners. And I hope I have people out here who will understand, because I'm going to be speaking as a Haitian, which means I will be speaking on more than one level. So if I go show you that and play that sound, the revolution was a spiritual as well as a literal revolution. So we were fighting powers and principalities. Haiti was the first to put liberty into application in the New World, and the first to bring civilization to planet Earth in terms of saying that slavery is not civilized. Before then, ships with the name of Jesus went back and forth from the Atlantic, from Africa, Atlantic, into what they call the triangular trade, which was where the trading of our grands as property. So one of the things I remember very clearly about my first introduction to the story of Haiti is that they said that there were 4 founding fathers. And that is one of the things that at the Free Haiti movement, we definitely want to destroy. But I learned that. That's what I learned. That was my introduction in books. It said Haiti had 4 founding fathers. So let me say who they were. Jean-Jacques Dessalines, Toussaint Louverture, Boyon and Pétion. As you all know, Boyon and Pétion, the mulatto sons of France, got together and killed Jean-Jacques Dessalines. So, and they came in the ship to fight on the side of the enslavers. And when we fought for our freedom, they were not at Vertières, neither Boyon nor Pétion. But yet, who wrote history? It wasn't us. And that's why what we do at Free Haiti is so critically important. And I thank you, Pascal, for giving us this platform, for actually understanding how important it is to understand not the colonial narrative on Haiti's history, because Pétion and Maggio, who wrote the history of Haiti that everybody reads and translates, was from the school of Pétion and Pétion's friend. And so he put Pétion as the hero. And Dessalines, for 42 years after 1806, Pétion and Boyer forbid his name to be spoken. If you spoke his name in Haiti, you would be imprisoned. But yet, they put him as a founding father, and he was not at Vertières, neither was his protege, Boyer. All right. And how about Toussaint Louverture? Well, Toussaint Louverture was dead when Haiti was founded. He was kidnapped and brought to France. And he died essentially begging Napoleon to see him as the first of the Blacks, and Napoleon was the first of the whites. But what's critically important about Toussaint Louverture is that he was a great strategist, but he never reached the level of Jean-Jacques Dessalines or the Maroons who were pushing this movement. Toussaint Louverture owned slaves. He was a free Black. And he wanted a Black ruled without slavery. He wasn't about slavery. He wanted a Black ruled and a Black ruled colony of France. These are the differences that we teach with regards to Toussaint Louverture and Jean-Jacques Dessalines. The difference is Toussaint Louverture, and it's written. This is not anything that you can't look up yourself. Look up the 1801 Constitution of Toussaint Louverture. In that Constitution, he said that slavery would be abolished, but that they would be a colony of France. And the people had to go back into sort of sharecropping. That is what we have today. Neocolonialism is the template of Toussaint Louverture. The whites, Blanc colons, they killed him for that. Because for them, we were just property without soul. Um, and you can see it today. They're still doing the same thing, except that they have their media to cover it up. So that's the difference. Those so four people that I learned when I was young, who were the founding fathers of Haiti. Today I stand with the Free Haiti movement to tell everyone in the whole wide world the name that was destroyed, the name that scares tyrants and despots. That is the person that we stand with. And his 1805 Constitution, before he died, is our template. And I hope today, as I answer your question, I go into what's so important about that.
Right. Yeah, thank you for that clarity, man. And one thing with the history is that we oftentimes look at it from the lens of our oppressors and what they wrote, right? And we ask them for information. So right now, when we look at the history books, we probably maybe a paragraph or something like that on Haiti and the Haitian Revolution, if even that. But you look at somebody who had a huge deal to do with it, like Christopher Columbus, right? There's
Mhm.
there's a whole, you might find kids reading books and singing. I know I was in elementary school, we were singing songs about Columbus and all that stuff, right? So how is it that you have somebody like Columbus, who I would view as maybe like the Hitler of our generation, if not worst? How is it that we can know so much about him, and then the folks connect, the from the other perspective, not know anything about Haiti? And I've heard too that people say, well, Haiti is not American history. This is Caribbean history. This is history, in Haiti or whatever. It's not really American history, but when we look at it, Americans were involved, right? Even Haiti influenced the Louisiana Purchase, like one of the biggest purchases of land that the U.S. had. So, in your view, like, how is it that these things are done where we don't even realize that we're being omitted from history, and it's not even there when there was such a huge connection?
Okay. So we're at 1492 with Christopher the pedophile, rapist, Columbus, bringer of doom.
Right.
But let's America creates its own mythology. Imperialism and white biological fatalism is about deceit, division, and illusion. It's not really about history. And I was a history major before I became a lawyer. And I think I've spent a great deal of time, and I hope that the next generation doesn't have to, a great deal of time unearthing our real history, what looks like me. So there was a woman, Ana Carona, Queen of Haiti, who took up arms against Christopher Columbus. He had killed her husband, Kaunabo. I think it's really important at this stage of our knowledge base that we don't have to go through all of the illusions that that Blanc-Colon, the colonists, and then try to like explode them. What I like to do, because there is so much beauty in who and what we are, but in the context of his story, it's all about oppression. So, and as a, my name is Èzili Dantor. For those who don't know what that means, the Abrahamic religions got rid of the mother and made her the Virgin Mary. But in my culture, right, women are could be anything they want to be and are. queens, war queens, before Alexander the pedophile also got to Egypt, the Sudan, and so forth. So we know, I'm not going to go into the African part of it, but let's look at the Haiti part. What did it look like before Columbus and his band of pillagers and plunderers got there? I think that's something I could do, perhaps that more than to help those who don't want to sit in the police blotter that they've made of our history. So what did it look like? Well, what's in IT is the reason why you have an occupation of IT today. What's in IT changes human history. And I'm going to try to give you guys, I'm looking forward to the questions. I will give you guys some references, but let's look at what is in IT. Let's begin with the name, Ai. Ai, it means earth. Ai. Before the bringers of doom, Neanderthal minds decided to bring their wars, because the Eurasians have been at war with each other since they got on planet Earth between 6,000 to 12,000 years ago. We have evidence in IT that goes back 135 million years ago. So I'm not even going into this descendant of apes sort of deceit. So what is the real story? Let's start with the dinosaurs. 66 million years ago. We are because I'm a voodooist and a lot of my history doesn't come from books, but my job in this space, in this time, is to bring you to spaces where you can logically figure this out. But a lot of the things that I have come to know, I had to learn them through the spirit. So 66 million years, we are intergalactical people, and I'm going to prove some of it to you. This is not our only space and planet. We all know about the Dorgons, but IT, Earth, it means Earth. There were 3 names for that island when Columbus got to it. It was named Quisqueya, Haiti, and Bohio. What do they mean? Quisqueya means mother of the earth. Ai, earth. Bohio, home. So those are the 3 names of the island. You all can just Google it. Now, Quisqueya, Bohio, mother of the earth. So now let me give you some context to that. The European story is that the earth was one landmass, and they call that Pangea. And they say that 66 million years ago, some asteroid hit it and broke Pangea, and you have all these continents throughout, right? Well, we can prove some of this in IT. And well, before I go there, remind me if I don't. Well, let me just do that right now. All right, so share screen if I can. So host disable participant screen sharing. Did you want to do that? No?
My fault. I was on mute. I got you. You're back. You're back as the host.
Sorry. All right. So, okay. 66 million years ago, an asteroid hit Haiti, hit the landmass, and there were a bunch of them. But the places that they hit specifically is where Haiti is and where South Africa is. But before I tell you that story, right? Let's switch something, right? They call it South Africa, but listen, it's north. The white man just changed the way the earth is just because he wants to be in the north. Okay. But if you like are a pilot, you know that when you go north, you actually going, excuse me, it's north, and then they're really in the south. Okay. So somehow it was South Africa and where Haiti is in the south of where the earth is that was hit by these asteroids. It was what I believe, and what looking at voodooist oral culture is a galactical war that was going on between giants. What evidence do we have? Well, under Haiti, the reason the United States is there is because there are pyramids under that water. We can't see them because they're not allowing any of that information out. But Haiti and Port-au-Paix are always talking about that. And if you go up to where we had the Capo a la Mort during the Haitian Revolution, most of the battles were up in the north. And they knew very, very well what was underneath those waters. Also, if you want to see what it might look like, Google the Blue Pyramids of Cuba. The Blue Pyramids of Cuba. And you will see, because, you know, Cuba is not colonized, so it's kind of allowed the world to see the pyramids under its territory, which is right next to Haiti. All right. And you have like a underwater route that go all the way to the Yucatan and the caracols. Okay. And now that I've gotten to that, I don't know if you all remember during the 2010 earthquake, the United States came in and they just took over Caracol, Haiti. If you go to Belize, and you look at the pyramids in Belize, the people that are called the caracols are what color? Black. Okay. In Haiti, when the earthquake happened, right, we have a section up there where the caracols used to live. The United States came in there, told you they're going to build up a, what do you call it? A sweatshop. And they went in there to excavate. Because during the first occupation in between 1915 and 1934, they were up there and they saw what was in there, but then they didn't have the technology to cart it out. They used the earthquake to build this large space that covers 9 miles, and you don't see what they're doing. Okay, so who were the blacks in Haiti during the time that Columbus got there? The black caracols. You're not going to see it because we didn't write our history. But if you go up to Belize, you will see the pyramids in Belize, and you can see the pictures of the caracols. Okay, we have Caracol Bay up in the north of Haiti. The place is so old, so old. I sort of like forgot exactly. I think it was like $33 trillion ecosystem. Just look it up, Caracol. And they put a sweatshop on it. Okay. So that's one of the people that was there with Anacaona, the black caracols. There were the Guaninis. These are people that were there before Columbus, but they try to tell you that the Chinese looking Taínos were the only folks that were there. Now, remember, there's been waves of foreigners coming to the landmass that they call the Western Hemisphere for centuries, right? But in the early, you have the Nordics and you have the Chinese, and of course the Chinese don't want you to know that they were there, and that's what Mexico is all about, and all those folks. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to show you what it looks like. I don't know why I can't see it. Normally I can, maybe it's the way I have. Can you guys see my?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. Normally I can see what you can see, but I don't, for some reason I can't see that. All right. So there's a place in Haiti called Beloc, Beloc. This is where people talk about the asteroid mountain. This asteroid mountain, there are many mountains in Haiti that are made of this material, because when the asteroid hit, I know if you guys seen Avatar, you've seen Black Panther. Well, that's what they're talking about. When, except they don't, the Vatican has all this information because they went to Haiti. They know it for 2 centuries. We just don't know it. All right. So, and then they write their little stories and play with our heads. Anyways, Burlock, Haiti asteroid mountain. What is it? It is the most heat resistant material, and it's used for going to outer space and building. You know, you see how these giant robber barons of this century, you know, Bezos, Elon Musk, and so on, they're all going to outer space. Well, they need Haiti's iridium, because that asteroid has the remains of it is called iridium. When I first started studying this back 30 years ago, the Haitian reference for this is a geologist called Daniel Mathurin. But there used to be a lot of US military papers that I just Googled and I found in Google, and you might still find some of them, that talks about where this iridium is and some of the other places. If you can see right here, I have a map. You see where, if you see the green, this slide is in my Free Haiti Movement page on Facebook, if you want to look at it closer, because I actually can't see what you're seeing. But anyways, the story is that the asteroid hit and killed the dinosaurs. At that time, our people were much taller. Dinosaurs were like their dogs. This is what we learn in our oral history. But that's what happened. So there was some sort of war. The reason I bring this up with regards to the iridium, they always talk about how Haiti's poor. One of the things we try to do is show Haiti's riches, right? When I first started studying how much iridium that was in Haiti, you know, Haiti is 1 billion years old. There are things there are no other place, because when there was this cataclysmic event and the landmass went underwater, the first mass to come up from water was Cuba and Venezuela, and Haiti. What's really important about the breaking of this mass at that space is that Haiti is on 4 tectonic plates, just like Israel and Saudi Arabia. So what do you have when you have tectonic plates? You have oil. Okay, so we are on when that was broken, we are on the North tectonic plate, South America tectonic plate, Caribbean tectonic plate, even the Pacific tectonic plate. And there's another one, which I can't remember, but right there, if you look at Lagonave in Haiti. So there's all this oil. Daniel Mathurin, the geologist, also say that the head of Venezuela's oil, you all know that Venezuela has the largest cache of oil in the world. They said the head of it is in Haiti's waters. There's no way the United States is leaving. All right. So that's one history. Okay. Let's go to another thing. I told you that we have something called this. It's called wash Helena. And I'm just, before I get to the history of Haiti, I just wanted you to see what you're never going to see anyplace else, because that's what we do. So it's at a place in Haiti called Camp Cock. And the United States tried to take it out back in 1915. And if you go to that rock, I don't even know what they did, because I haven't been there. I've been there once. You could see the chain marks where they were trying to lift it, but they couldn't. So these are all the things that they're doing in Haiti. Camp Cock is an ancient artifact, a Haiti rock monument with carvings made by inhabitants between 35 to 100 million years ago. It was carbon tested by Daniel Maturin. He was, of course, killed in the Dominican Republic sometime after the second coup d'etat, sometime after 2004. His wife is still alive. The Camp Cock structure is found in the Artibonite in Haiti. And for centuries, local Haitians pray there. They revere and pay homage at the site as the most sacred place. Dr. Maturin says that these carvings that you can see, I don't know if you can, are you guys seeing a full screen? Because I can't, I don't know what you're seeing.
Yeah, we're seeing the
okay.
Pretty full. Yeah, it's a complete screen.
Okay, good. All right. So these carvings, he compared them to Egyptian carvings, and he says that they are codes to access energy sources. So these are all in Haiti. The other thing that's in Haiti, I would have to go way down into my slide, but let me tell you that we have the most cave art in the Caribbean, and the deepest caves, longest caves in the Caribbean. So you can look those things up. The occupation that the United States have had since 2004, they are steadily carting out all of it. And so all that history is also being carted out. But you can look up Marie-Louise Bomba, who is Christopher. Well, you know what? I missed him. He was one of the 4 founding fathers. I'm sorry, I just remember. Henri Christophe. It was Henri Christophe, Pétion, Dessalines, and Toussaint. Excuse me, it wasn't Boyer. Henri Christophe, Dessalines, and Pétion. Henri Christophe, you all know, King of the North, who built the citadel. And when Dessalines was killed, Henri Christophe separated from Pétion, and the Haiti became 2 for a while. Marie-Louise Bomba is the wife of Henri Christophe, and that cave that I'm telling you about, that you should all look up, it's named Marie-Louise Bomba cave, and I was looking for it so I can show you what it looks like. But essentially, so you can see that. Let's go now. I've told you about Wash Helena, 35 to 135 million years ago. Some sort of sentient being wrote on that rock. Then you have all the cave arts with all these effigies of rock monuments of people and women and so on. Then you have the iridium. Okay, and there is a lake in Haiti. It's called Lake Azue. I think it's Azeu. And Lake Azue has 11 extinct species that are found nowhere else in the world. Just to give you some of the inkling of what this place looked like before Columbus got there and how important it was. But I'm going to finish this, what did Haiti look like before with just one final one that I kind of really love. I think that it's really important for new Haitians and folks like you guys to know this. Are you watching my screen?
Yeah, we see everything. Yep.
Sorry. Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, I can't see it. I apologize. So there is a woman by the name, and they call her many names: Mother of the Moon, Daughter of the Moon, Bilquis, Makeda, Queen of Sheba. You guys can find information that she crossed the Rock of Gibraltar, you know where Spain is, to come to Haiti long ago. So there was traveling back and forth, not just with Mansuma, what is it? Mansa Musa? Not,
Yep.
not just with his ships, okay? So you can find some of this information because, like I said, the Catholic Church has hidden a lot of this information, but there are some Spanish authors that have been able to go into the Catholic Church and then take out some of this information. There is a book called The American Nations by Constantine Samuel Rafinesque, Rafinesque. And he talks about the Africans that were original to the planet, the Africans that were original people in the Americas, to the planet, including in the Americas. But he talks about the Black Caracals, the Guaninis, and the Aguaho, Arguaho. These are some of the many ancient Africans of Haiti. Of course, I'm saying Africans, right? But we were, just so you all know, that we're Black people. Before the European colonization and before the Mahafa, right? In addition, obviously, you know that Blacks from the continent of Africa were sailing to the Americas long before Columbus decided he's discovered the Americas, right? And the Chinese and the Vikings also traveled to the Americas before Columbus. But Columbus, obviously, when you started your question, Pascal, you said that they have a day of what do you call that? A day of holiday for Columbus, but Columbus never set foot in the United States.
Mm.
Never. Okay.
That was a great piece of information. Half of that I didn't even know. The Rock didn't know. Thank you for that, Èzili, man, giving us pride in ourselves. So looking at the people that were there, right? Somehow, Columbus got there and kind of, rid himself of the people of the land, and they needed more people to work the land. So they went and got Africans. So can you walk us through kind of like what happened when Columbus got there and how millions of natives just disappear and they have to go to Africa to get millions more Africans to put back in Haiti?
Certainly. I want you all to also forget their history, because there is a song, a Vodouish song, that essentially said that, we're not going to stay here with this, this baby, this entity that hasn't lived and believes only one plane of life, what he can see. And I just want to leave something with you with regards to that. They say that like whole cities just disappeared. Just to remember that, like some of those things were choices and it wasn't conquest. But of course, the conquistadors, some of them were choices to leave to go to different planes, just as there are people who say that the ancestors came back for the Haitian Revolution. All right, so 1492, he got there. There was about maybe 1 million people. By the time within 15 years, he had committed genocide, because they had different biological things that would when they came, they would be infectious for the native people. And the native people died of many things that they got, diseases that they got from these infectious people who brought diseases to them. And some of the diseases were biological weapons that were used, like smallpox in a blanket. They did that. They're still doing those types of biological things, and our intellectuals refuse to have these conversations. So you have 5 caciques. The island was divided into 5 chieftains that ruled their particular areas. They came in, and the guy in the north, he bowed down. He let them in. He was probably the weakest of those chieftains, and Christopher Columbus left a colony of 29 men, and he went back to Queen Isabella, essentially, to try to get more, because he's like the people were wearing gold, not knowing that this was going to be their death. So to them, it was just trinkets. The idea, I think this is a Black thing, an indigenous thing, the idea that a sentient being is less important than a little trinket never entered into their minds. But obviously, the European is really into these blanks. And so he went back, came back with more, but the first colony that was destroyed in the New World, right, was in the north of Africa, the north of Haiti, and it was destroyed by the folks that were there, right? Kaunabo, his brother-in-law, Anakaona, and it was through deceit that they ended up killing Anakaona. By 1505, they had destroyed most of that population, and a Catholic priest by the name of Bartholomew de la Casa began what is called the Mahafa, the East slave trade. But let's remember, the Arabs had been trading Africans for thousands of years, since 700 AD. Since that time, they were enslavers. There were 1492 was the fall of that of Grenada, right? We had the Moors, the fall of Grenada, what they call the Iberian Peninsula. That's why it's really important to know that history, because if you know that the Dominican Republic is a mortal enemy of Haiti, they came from the Dominicans that were fighting the Moors. They think of us as the Black hordes, and then they got to Haiti later on. But 1503, the first boatload of Black people came from the deportation of Moors from Africa. The Iberia, from Spain, right? Spain had conquered where they call Portugal now, southern France, and what's called Spain. And so there was a fight going on before Haiti, before all of that. So in that fight, that was the fall of Grenada. 1492 was the fall of Grenada. 1505, the Africans, they brought 4,000 Moors into Haiti as slaves. And then it got good for them, and they started going down the coast of Africa, and the triangular trade started. But it took 300 years before we could beat these Europeans and get rid of slavery. 300, from 1503 to 1803. So imagine how long our ancestors have been fighting. And now we've had 200 years of containment in poverty after Dessalines' assassination.
Yeah, man. Quite some time dealing with all of this stuff, man. So afterwards, if we fast forward, from them putting the Africans on the island and fast forward to the, French control, France built pretty much the wealthiest area within the Western Hemisphere when we're talking about spices, riches, and everything that was being produced in Haiti. But they had one of the harshest and cruelest slave systems that was occurring at the time because, a lot of people, when they look at the Haitian Revolution and they look at the pictures of, white folks hanging and, black folks chopping white folks' heads off, like, yo, this is barbaric, like, all this stuff. So, can you paint a picture for us of actually what was going on, uh, how the French enslaved black folks in Haiti and what it looked like? Because we think that what was happening with the Haitians fighting back was cruel and savage, but what was actually happening that led to us saying like, yo, this is enough? Like, what was going on at the time in regards to slavery?
Okay, so Africans all over have been fighting since since they started, since we've never accepted being enslaved. And so there was a big colony of maroons in those mountains, right? Remember the picture I showed you guys at the beginning of the unknown maroon. So Haiti wasn't really the first place in the Americas that was freed, but we're the only one that is still a nation today, right? In Brazil, you have a whole bunch of fighting going on. You all know that Brazil has the largest population of Black people outside of the Americas, outside of Africa, excuse me. So there was Palomares. It was a Brazilian territory. There was those Palomares warriors had beaten the Portuguese, right? You guys should know that the white man at that time and still today justify all his democracy and his civilization, which is all barbarity, with God. So at that time, it was the Pope that was managing, dividing the territories between the Portuguese, the Spanish, and so on. And so, so I don't want to forget Palomares and the people there, but they were allowed, they kept their territory, I think, for about 80 years. Haiti has been going and fighting for 200. But if we don't actually get young Haitians to understand the story I'm saying right now, we're going to fall like Palomares, even though we are essentially stumbling along as a nation. Palomares no longer exists, okay? And it was a free African area for a long time, and there are others like that in the Americas. So this is what you have. And so, okay, I just lost you. I have no idea where you are. Anyways, so that's kind of what the
Got me?
yeah, no, it's just my I'll find it. But anyways, so yes, 1503, the Bartholomew de la Casa brings in a boatload, because they were deporting all dark skinned Moors and so on out of back into Northern Africa, out of Spain. And so that's really how it started, 1503. Padre Jean, there've always been revolutions in maroon colonies in Haiti. Padre Jean was 1670. Around 1671, up by Mole Saint Nicolas in the north of Haiti. The French were fighting against the Spanish. So the French, the English, and the Spanish were always fighting for this territory. The natives were just looking at them like, you can own land. Like, that very idea made no sense to them. So it took a long time to get into that kind of culture. So anyways, the French was pushing into the Hispanic, because when Christopher Columbus came there, he came on behalf of Spain, even though he's Italian. He came on behalf of Spain. Fernando, King Fernand, and his wife. He named that island Hispaniola, to mean Little Spain. I hate that. Haitians, some or not Haitians, but weather report people always forget that that is not our name, because Dessalines took the name back to Haiti. So it's not Hispaniola, it's the island of Haiti. And that was in our first 1805 Constitution, that the island, we freed the island. There was no Dominican Republic. The Haitian Revolution freed the island of Hispaniola and changed the name back to the original Haiti. Okay, so essentially what you have is that the European tribes are fighting for land and resources. They're still doing it. And so at certain point, there's a war between the French pirates and the Spanish ones. And then they did the Treaty of Winswick in 1697. And so half the island became a French colony. The other half stayed as a Spanish, French colony, Spanish colony, okay? When the revolution started on August 14, 1791, with a Vodun ceremony that began the Haitian Revolution. It went on till 1804, till when we won that war at the Battle of Vertières. During the time of the Haitian Revolution, when it started in 1791, there was about 500,000 Africans on the island by that time. Those Africans, their lifespan was between 3 to 6 years. The majority, because the circumstances were so awful. They used to, the French used to bury us alive in the hot sun so that ants would eat our heads. They would take a pregnant woman who was pregnant and take their bayonets and have a game to see which will die first, the child or the mother. They would do all kinds of sexual perversions, castrate. There's a famous story, I like to tell it, but of a Haitian woman. She was a young child. She used to essentially, her name is Zabeth. She's the eternal maroon. You guys can look her up. Since a lot of times, one of our work is to elevate the women of the Haitian Revolution. Zabeth came first a long time before the 1791. She was very, very small, and she was killed at 20, but she was a maroon. She never stopped fighting. I use her as an example. So we pour libation for her when we talk, when we start, we lift up her spirit. In Léogane, Haiti, there's a song during the Haitian Revolution. When that song was being sung, it was to lift up the spirit of Zabeth, the eternal maroon. The reason I sometimes pick Zabeth, let me see if I can share my screen one more time. If my host will help
You got
Hello?
it?
Okay. I'm going to share the screen so you guys can, those who are here can see Zabeth. You see this picture everywhere. You see that woman with, they used to put a mask on us, right? So that we couldn't talk, so we couldn't eat. She's shackled, if you can see here. Zabeth, for those of you who are listening to the audio, is Zabeth. Of course, that's a English way of saying her name. So Zabeth became well, she would constantly, since she was like 8 years old, 9 years old, 12 years old, about 16 times she ran away. She did not want to be a slave. And you know how they used to have children, um, pick cotton. Um, so she had a mark on her left cheekbone. They branded her, they used to brand the I guess the people as property with whatever the house of the master was. So they brand her with this thing, this fleur de lis, French monarchy, the symbol of terror. At 20 years old, during Zabeth's final recapture by the rapists and tyrants, she was trampled, tortured, battered, broken at the wheel, rent apart in pieces. They would take a horse and they would tie both your hands, your legs, and then they would rend you. So that's kind of how it looked like for the people of Haiti.
Yeah, there was quite a lot happening, man. And I think those things are super important for us to understand when we look at the images of the Haitian Revolution and what was happening, and for us to understand what was actually happening to the Haitian people, you know, on the land. You know, what were some of the things that you mentioned, and then also too, like looking at the French and how they were behaving. We don't think about that during the Revolution, where they're cutting black people open and allowing dogs to eat them and watching as dogs are eating them alive. you know they're they're shipping uh Haitians to the sea and drowning them. I think they and the Black Jacobins by CLR James, he said there was a fleet of 1,000 Haitians that went off to sea, and they were all drowned. And this was happening regularly. It was so bad that the French were, sometimes wouldn't even eat fish because they said they didn't want to, you know, have that tainted fish. So this stuff was a hideous system of slavery that was going on there, and I think it's understandable as to some of the things that were happening during the revolution. But before the revolution, when we think about the Haitians getting the courage to stand up to their oppressors and to fight, we got to think about Wakaima, right, and what was going on there. And I think it's important to understand the courage of the Haitian people, because you're looking at, they say the people that didn't go to war, that didn't have war experience, didn't even know how to use a gun. They had to learn that on the go. So, can you talk to us about Wakaima and how they were able to get the warrior spirit to take on the French?
Yes, so it was a spiritual war as well as a physical war in Haiti. And so August 14th, 1791, after 300 years of this barbaric white enslavement, um, where the women were raped to make property, where they had these stud farms and things where they force rape on the males, or the white women would have their husbands and their children, their sons rape black women in order to make property for the plantation. After all of that, the you have in 1757 Macandal. Macandal was a maroon. He would come down from the mountains and show the kitchen women how to make poison. And they started poisoning the families of the plantation. He was eventually captured. But Makandal is a precursor, the guy who people remembered because he left a prophecy. He said that we will rule this island once more. And so in 1791, at a hillside, there is a woman, Iman. People call her Iman, but I do the Boakaima. I do a Free Haiti Movement teach-in 6 times a year, doing specific times like Boakaima, like Vertier, and so on. So there's tons of information out there about Boakaima. I think my first play was the Boakaima ceremony that I did on stage. So this is a Vodun ceremony where the sentient beings were ancient people with a civilized mindset, called on their ancestors. And Queen Nzinga had been fighting the Portuguese before she was betrayed in all of that. And a lot of her people were in Haiti, right? And you all know the song One Golo, right? About this queen, but in Haiti she's known as Mumble Inan. Queen Nzinga is known as a Loa, a deity, because she was so powerful in her warriorship. And the legend is, since nobody actually wrote our story, is that Queen Nzinga's adherents, those who remember the fight in the Congo, those who remember the fight in Dahomey against enslavement coming down to them, because they had been fighting in Africa for 1,000 years at least. So you have a couple of women that are important for people to know. You have the woman who went back into slavery to teach Jean-Jacques Dessalines as a small boy how to fight, how to understand the terrain, and how to lead. She showed him how to do hand-to-hand combat. She was a Dahomean guard, like you saw in the Black Panther. Her name is Toya. He called her Aunt Toya. You guys can find that story on Free Haiti. Also, you have Grand Guiton, who was the spiritual advisor of Jean-Jacques Dessalines. But in this space of August 14th, 1791, they came together. They decided they were going to burn it all down, because if property was more important than human beings, they would burn down all the property. And that's what they did. On August 14th, they planned it, and the revolution started 7 days later. Because we came from different tribes in Africa, some of them didn't have the same language. Some of them didn't have the same educational capacity. And some of them did, like Bookman. The legend is he was the man of the book, which means that he possibly could have been Muslim. But whatever he was, he had converted, because it was a Vodun ceremony that he led on August 14th, 1791, with a mumble. And, we lose the names of the women, okay? But you can figure it out, because it's bois. They changed it, right? Because in Creole, in Haitian, the word bois means like wood, like a stick, bois, or in the woods. Kai means house, like a house. Inan, she was Mambo Inan. And really, Bwakaima means Bo Kai Mambo Inan, by her house. That's where they held the ceremony, by the house of the Mambo, who is the priestess, right? Remember I said that unlike patriarchy and white civilization, so-called, women could be priestesses. You know, you don't have that in the Catholic Church. You don't have that in these other places, right? So Bo Kai Mambo Inan is what it was. At that ceremony, it was near her house in the woods. And they had the ceremony and she presided. And I got my name from the first spirit that came. It was the mother warrior spirit. You may know her by various names. The Greeks changed her name from Aset to Isis, but it is Èzili Dantor for us. So Èzili Dantor quickened the priestess. If you know some things of Egyptian history, you know that women were revered in a lot of different stories, whether it's in the Sudan or whether it's in Benin, right? The mother knew who her children were, and she would choose the ones amongst the warriors that would lead. And that's what happened at Bwakaima. Èzili Dantor came in. There were so many different, there were 200 people, delegates at Bwakaima. And the spirit of Èzili Dantor, inhabited by Mambo Inan, chose Bookman. And you all know the great, most amazing foundation of Haitian epistemology, Haitian philosophy, Haitian struggle comes from that evening. And it is the most important thing we teach. We want every Haitian to understand what it means. You know, America, their foundation comes from the Declaration of Independence. You guys remember, right? Jefferson, the pedophile who was daily raping Sally Hemings, the half sister of Martha. That's their foundation. You know that, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's his Declaration of Independence. Okay, so he was committing crimes while talking, you know, the other side of his mouth, talking about all men are created equal, right? Okay, really, really important for young Haitians to hear what I'm saying. That's the foundation of the American experiment. It's Jefferson's Declaration of Independence. All men are created equal, right? Didn't include Black males, didn't include men who didn't have property. And definitely wasn't thinking about women, Black or white. Okay, that's their foundation. All right, but the foundation of our independence started in 1791, and for some reason I was gonna play it for you guys.
Oh, wait. I got you.
Okay,
Make you host again.
I was gonna play it for you guys. You good?
Wait a minute. You are the host. So
I am.
should be able to play. Yeah.
Okay, how come I can't see share? So this is the foundation of Haiti.
God who created the earth, who created the sun that gives us light, God who holds up the ocean, who makes the thunder roar, our God who has ears to hear, you who are hidden in the clouds, who watch us from where you are. You see all that the white has made us suffer. The white man's God asked him to commit crimes, but the God within us wants to do good. Our God, who is so good, so just, he orders us to avenge our wrongs. It's he who will direct our arms and bring us the victory. It's he who will assist us. Throw away the image of the white man's God who is so pitiless, and listen to the voice of liberty that sings in all our hearts.
All right. So that is Bookman's prayer. That once he was chosen, now if you guys want to go look and you can see the parallels of our history, if you Google Isis, you'll see like she's like on a throne of Isis. It was the same kind of like we repeat our history. So the 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 European, when they got to Africa, they saw how the mother, the great mother within each of these ethnicities would choose the warrior that would lead by putting the person on their lap. So that's what the throne is, right? It's like the lap of Isis or Aset or Èzili Dantor. So this is what you had at Bois-Caïman. You had the spirit of Èzili Dantor rising. And then you have Bookman laying down what we would need to follow. We don't follow it, of course, because the first thing he said, the most important thing, he said, the God of the white man wants to commit crime. Remember Jefferson? He was daily committing crime against a human being that was a child, the half sister of his wife. And she was busily letting him do it so she could have more estate. Sally Hemings, if you guys remember, had 6 children. When Jefferson died, she refused to free them. Martha refused to free the children of Sally Hemings. And so that's the American history. This is the Haiti story. We are descendants of slave breakers. We are descendants of freedom fighters. They are descendants of slave makers and enslavers. So that's why whatever spirit is ruling this planet has put us here for one reason and one reason alone. It's to free that planet. And we did that. And that's why we are so hated. We are the most hated people in the Western Hemisphere. You could see our torture in Del Rio a couple of months ago, right? When that cowboy was deciding to hit us. You could see when just they do whatever they want. But met la croix retourne, right? Our ancestors have returned. So what I can say with regards to Bois-Caïman is that it's really important for every Haitian and every Black person, every sentient being who wants to understand what life is about, that the white man's God wants him to commit crimes. This is the Abrahamic religions. But our God, and we don't have any intermediaries, the one within us wants to do good. That's why I call myself a vaudouist. Not because I do what they call règlement, like all of the rituals, because the people doing those things don't even know what they're doing. If you can't scientifically tell me why it is being done, just like I scientifically told you why I believe we are intergalactical people by showing you Wash Elena, the iridium, which I wanted to say at first, tell you that when I first started studying, it was 1 ton of iridium was $45 million. Imagine, we have mountains of it. If you look at Haiti, we're right in between what they call the Windward Passage. And all these boats go through there. If we had sovereignty, the tolls enough would develop Haiti. But we don't have sovereignty. Other people are making the money. So essentially, Wakaima is our origin. It's the beginning of the Haitian Revolution. 13 years later, on a hilltop in the north, what they called Vertières, at a fort in Vertières, we beat the most sadistic terrorists that came before Hitler. And his name is Rochambeau. We beat Rochambeau. He used to, like you were saying, Pascal, he would put Haitians in the hulls of ship and put sulfur and gas them all before Hitler. That's what they were doing to the Haitians. And his name is Rochambeau. So when Jean-Jacques Dessalines rose up, Rochambeau told everybody that he was going to beat him like a child, that he was going to take off his clothes and just whip him as soon as he found them. Rochambeau is the general that came after General Leclerc. So 13 war, in that 13-year war, which began at Bois Caïman, where you have 200 delegates from all different plantations. It's a very interesting story because there are people that were at Bois Caïman that did not go the distance. I'm always saying that because it's really important because there are people in the Free Haiti movement that never have not gone the distance. So, not everyone's going to go the distance because it's a long road. So some of the important people at Bois Caïman that you guys should know about, like one of them, George Biassou, right, ended up staying with the Spanish. And he went to Florida, where he would help free some African-American enslaved people. But it was on behalf of the Spanish, who at that time controlled St. Augustine in Florida, controlled Florida. We also, of course, fought against slavery in Mexico. So Haitians have been everywhere fighting. At the end of the Haitian Revolution, we went to 5 Latin American countries and liberated them. If you look at the Latin American countries right underneath Haiti, Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, and so forth, we sent ships and soldiers. We've done so much to liberate that that idea exhausted and made fearful the white colonists, who knew that he's only 12% of the world population, and that if we got together. So what he did was he got together before the Spanish, the French, and the English, and all the Western nations were fighting each other for land. After the success of Haiti, they all got together as one fist. And Haiti was embargoed by the United States under Jefferson for 60 years. All our ships, we were not allowed to move and go do trade. We had we beat the British, and the British were king of maritime, right? King of the seas. But they sent 50,000 troops against Dessalines, and those 50,000 troops died in Haiti. And if you look in these are resources we have too, because we did not have arms. So we used the arms that they brought to us, because the type of people we don't make arms, but they bring the arms to us. So if you go to the Citadel and you see these arms, those were arms of the British ships, the French ships, the Spanish ships. Because in order to win our revolution, we beat first the French in 1791. One of the ways we did it was allying with the Spanish that was on the other side. The Spanish wanted to fight the French because the French took the island from them, remember? So they were like, oh, we'll just let these Negroes fight for us, and then we'll just like move them out of the way and take the whole entire island But Toussaint Louverture was a great strategist. He knew that. So he fought the Spanish, but so he fought the Spanish, and then we got the whole entire island. But a few of the men that were at Bois Caïman did not fight the Spanish. They stayed with the Spanish, and they were deported out of Haiti. And George Biassou was one of them. Okay, and his story is really interesting. So there are people who accepted slavery that came out of Bois Caïman, and George Biassou was one of them. He was going for himself. So I think, yeah, so that's how the story started. 13 years, the greatest generals, Henri Christophe the Builder, he directed and supervised the generals that were in the north. Jean-Jacques Dessalines supervised everybody. And then you have Capois Lamont. Those are the greatest ones. Capois Lamont was the general at Vertières, the final battle of the Haitian Revolution. And so when we won that revolution, we were in a sea of slaves, right? Jamaica, Puerto Rico, I mean, all those islands were colonies with slaves in them. So that scared the white man. And then what you have to understand is Haiti was the richest colony in the world. There were 13 at that time in 1791. Well, before 1776, because the United States was a colony of England, and then they fought. And of course, you know, some of the slaves went to Savannah and fought for American independence, but they were doing it for the French. But in 1776, the United States got its freedom from England as a colony. But what you have to understand is that the French was helping the United States against England. That's why they send those like Pétion. He was a drummer boy. He was a young person, mulatto, father is French. He went to fight for the French in Savannah to help America get its independence. But at that time, the idea of ending slavery did not come to neither France or the United States, because France, most of its money came from the enslaved people in Haiti. All the colonies of the British, all 13 colonies of the British, did not make as much money for England that Haiti made for France, all 13. So when France sent troops, including Black soldiers, to Savannah to fight England, it wasn't thinking about getting rid of slavery. America wasn't thinking about getting slavery when it became the United States. So that's why they got together when the first declaration of Haiti's independence is really important. It's not January 1st. And it's really important to go look at that. It's November 29th. So the last battle of the Haitian Revolution was November 18th, 1803. By that time, months before, the Napoleon, when he came into power, he sent an armada to go take away the freedom of Haitians. So that armada was led by his brother-in-law, General Leclerc. He had just finished, his rampage throughout Europe. Never occurred to Napoleon that his best soldiers could be beaten by these barefoot Haitians. So his sister, who was married to General Leclerc, accompanied Leclerc on that boat because she was going to party and have a good time after they had murdered and committed genocide. Leclerc said when he got to Haiti and he saw how strong and determined the Haitians were, he said to Napoleon that if you want this island back, you have to commit genocide. If you want this island back, and he said, you have to kill every Haitian who ever wore a soldier's uniform. You have to kill every child above the age of 14. So that was their intention, to bring back slavery, commit genocide for the whole entire population, children above the age of 14. And then they were just going to bring some more in, because I told you the trade was very brisk in Haiti. The Haitian Revolution started with 500,000 Blacks, about 40,000. There was like three different types of social, or there were three different types of people. There were the African enslaved, there were the free Blacks that had gotten their freedom in some way or the other. They were the chasseurs, right? They used to have children and then send them to, this was the first diaspora, send them to France to come back and be the slave catchers. And that was one of the things that Pétion was and Boyer was, before they got their grades in the army of the French. So in that boat, Toussaint, who was a free man before the revolution, he helped his former masters to emigrate to Louisiana in America before he took up arms against the whites. But he always thought that he would get rid of slavery, but he would be a French colony. That's essentially the story of Haiti in terms of like 1803. The most important independence declaration was after the Vertière. It was November 29th. And you guys can actually write down November 29th, Haitian independence, and he sent it. The warriors, they sent that. Toussaint Louverture was captured by Leclerc's generals and soldiers and kidnapped and put on a boat in 1802 to the Jura Mountains, and he died and froze there. He got tortured, but so did his wife. They took his wife, Suzanne. God knows what they did with her. She had 2 children. And eventually, years later, the British gave her asylum in Britain. So those are the type of the stories. The Haitian story is like, there's a lot in there. In terms of the types of people, like I said, there was the Africans, and even within the Africans that had came, those who were born, the African slaves, the Black enslaved, those who were born in Haiti were called Creole. Those who were newly brought in or were born in Africa were called Bosal. And then they had the Blamana, which is like sort of rednecks. They were poor whites. They were like the overseers. Then you have Gandon, right? The plantation owners and their class of people. And then you have the free Blacks and their class of people. There is a Haitian or a Black man who was a free Black. He owned slaves. He used to go to the salons of France. His name was Vincent Auger, O-G-E. And before 1791, during the French Revolution, he saw that the French people were revolting and they were giving rights to the lower class, non-monarchical French people. And he says, well, I should have voting rights too, because I'm educated, I have property, and so on. And that was Auger, Vincent, and that came in before the Haitian Revolution. And you know, the French killed him just for that. So these are the stories. There's a lot of thread with regards to the Haitian Revolution, but this is really, really important. I want everyone listening to me, especially Haitian, especially the Black woman's children, to understand history means nothing unless, as you know, my favorite historian says, you use it to break your chains for today. It means nothing, none of what I'm saying. So at Free Haiti, we use the lessons of the Haitian Revolution to move us forward. And the call at Boakaima, that is our religion at Free Haiti, was in the language, in the Kinkongo language of Queen Nzinga, right? Remember I told you who was there as the priestess. E Mabamba, Kanga Mandele, Kanga Bafioti, Kanga Najoki, Kanga Yo. It means, and this is our template. It's the only template that beat white supremacy. We've got to stop Mandele. Mandele in the Kinkongo language means the stranger. I'll let you believe what that is. The stranger. Okay. Bafioti means his collaborators, his Black collaborators. We've got to stop the stranger, his Black collaborators, and Najoki means his evil forces. Okay. Our at Boakaima, not only do we have Bookman's prayer, the most important part of which is the white man's God wants him to commit crimes. The God within us wants us to do good. Throw away the image of the white man's God and listen to the voice of liberty in the God within you. Okay? Dessalines sets the same sort of thing during the Declaration of Independence in 1804. He said, and if you read it, in the 1804 Declaration of Independence, he said, listen, we're calling ourselves free, but everywhere we go, the names of the French are in all our cities. The names of the French are everywhere. We are not free until we get rid of those things, their presence. Well, I'm Èzili Danto. I don't carry a French name. I used to have a colonial name, but I heard Bookman's prayer and I heard Jean-Jacques Dessalines. Decolonization is a process of claiming yourself. And that's what the Boakaima tells us. That's what the 1804 Declaration of Independence tells us. That's what Bookman tells us. That's what Dessalines tells us, the two greatest men and revolutionaries of Haiti. So 1804 to now, 218 years, what has happened? Well, like I was saying, right? We have this revolutionary, absolute revolutionary, moral, spiritual, economic way of being that is totally different from Mandela. Okay? What are those things? It's really important to know why we are facing what we're facing. What are those things? Vive la coup combite. I've already told you what the template is, right? You have to get rid of the Black collaborators, the colonists, and his evil forces. If Neely Fuller talks about evil forces in a different way, right? But for us, evil forces was the white man's religion, his media, his economics, his laws, his way of being counter nature, as opposed to being in harmony with nature. We find ourselves as in trust with the air, the water, the four elements. But him, he doesn't even know the four elements in terms of his everyday life. But in our space, I have the water, you have the fire, air, earth, the cardinal points, right? Everything means something to us. Every action means something to us. So what is it that scares this sentient being that we call Mandele in the Kinkongo language of Queen Mazenga? Well, Vive means that every human being has the right to life. Vive. So even now, as we go through COVID, as we go through the colonialism and police brutality, you still have to do it. You have to live. Have the children, the time with the earth, the time to play. You have to live. Okay, we created a culture even under enslavement. So today, for instance, if America has music, a lot, it came from Haiti, jazz, rock and roll, Vodun, those are the Vodun drums, because even under enslavement, we danced, we played, we had children, we continued. So I'm always saying to Haitians, know your culture, no matter how deep the pain, how traumatic it might be, you still have to live, have a lifestyle. You still have to do it. So Vive is number one. Laku means that each family takes care of the family, gives it a piece of land, and they plant and they create out of that. Dessalines' first constitution is one of our Bibles, right? He said every Haitian has to have a skill, something they can do with their hands that's useful to the community or useful to them, and in terms of taking care of themselves in this avatar. Okay, so Vive, Laku, Combi means that you get together. It's cooperative economics. You put the Lakus together, you put things together, and you live together. And so communal advancement, because we are as weak as the lowest amongst us. So that's these philosophies that scares the white man. And I tell Marxists, for instance, Haitians, I was like, you don't need to go there. We've already got this. So these are the things that I think that when we talk about our history, we can't forget this culture, what even in slavery or even in containment and poverty, what we bring, right? Because even in slavery, we brought, the second line into New Orleans, right? It was those that were enslaved that went over there. Okay, we bring in jazz, we bring in, the Catherine Dunham method comes from Vodun dancing, right? And modern dancing. All right. What do we bring today? And one of the things that we teach is that in the middle of this darkness that we're facing as a people everywhere, okay, because Mandela is never going to change, because that is his fuck legal ani. This is what Haitians say, right? They say, you know what? It's his nature. It's like, that story of the scorpion, giving you a ride across the ocean, across halfway through a lake, right? And the scorpion is giving you that ride, but his nature is to sting you, even if he dies in that lake. And this is what you have to remember about the white man and his culture. That's his nature. So this is what we teach. We say that we have, what's his name? Macandal. Macandal got rid of the Black collaborators before he even got to the masters. It is the Black collaborators that stopped the Haitian Revolution. Pétion and Boyer. Remember that. And now, you know, we've got a whole bunch of them who are doing the bidding of empire. So the Haitian call template is we have to block the collaborators, marginalize them. We have to block, kill, do whatever is necessary to marginalize Mandela and then his evil forces. I think Neely Fuller talks about every level of activity of the white man is about domination, or maybe that's Dr. Henry Clark. So I can go up to, you know, how after 1804, and I'll try to go more quickly, but you asked me your question. Sorry.
Yeah. So thank you for that, Èzili, by the way. Very powerful information right there. I do want to add to that, when we look at the Haitian Revolution and just things in general nowadays, like people always want to look for leaders and this, all that. But the Haitian Revolution, even though Toussaint was originally the leader, you know, afterwards, after Toussaint was captured, you know, different people were taking over. Dessalines was taking over, and there were different things happening. Even Leclerc that you mentioned, in the Black Jacobins, they had a letter that he wrote to the French, and he said that it wasn't enough that we took Toussaint. There are 2,000 leaders that we need to take away, right? So we're talking about, you know, fighting still happening, organization still happening without Toussaint, you know, which was the leader at the time. So I think that's a great lesson to learn, you know, from the revolution as well. And another thing, which was a big factor afterwards, after the revolution was won, was the French coming back after they were exiled out of the, you know, out of the island. They came back, and then somehow a deal was made to pay back reparations, which was what they say, like in billions of dollars now, that Haiti, you know, recently finished paying back. So can you talk about that real quick, and then we'll get into some questions. Can you talk about why we would agree to pay the French reparations after the war?
Okay.
And the
So,
impact?
yes, I certainly will. So I told you about the Black collaborators, all right? So who are the Black collaborators? They are the Eurocentric Blacks, the ones who feel much more comfortable not being African, right? Not issuing from source. And in Haiti at that time, the mulatto sons of France were the ones that helped killed Jean-Jacques Dessalines. There were others. There were Black freemen who, both sides, there were Black freemen who helped the African warriors, and there were Black freemen. There was a general in the South who helped Napoleon and the enslavers, right? And I've already told you about Auger, the mulatto, who just wanted, you know, civil rights. He just wanted his civil rights. He didn't care about slavery. And that's really what the civil rights movement was about. It wasn't really about the masses. It ended up being turned around to just civil rights. I'm sorry, I kind of forgot what the question was. Where did you say? Oh my God. All right. Yeah. I'm sorry. Could you tell me the question again?
Yeah, we were talking about Haiti agreeing to pay the
yes.
French
Okay,
reparations
got
and
it.
the impact.
Thank you so much. See your moment there. All right. All right. So in all right, so 1823. No, 1801, we get our excuse me, 1804, we are independent, and all the European nations are in shock, wanting to do something about it, you know, thinking that, you know, they can just pluck this because they all have slaves, right? Remember the America, and I try not to say America for the United States, because America is a whole continent. We all are in the Americas, unfortunately. We all here. I don't, so in the United States, formal slavery did not end until 1865 with the civil rights, with the Civil War, right? But there's an exception to that. So slavery in America actually never ended, because if you are 13th Amendment allows them to just put you in jail, and then, essentially equivalent of slavery is back. So America never ended its slavery, and nobody has thought to change that 13th Amendment anywhere, even when they had the bootlicker Obama. So that's America. Haiti, I told you what its Bible is. It's Bookman's Prayer, and it is the template of the Bois Caïman call. So they had to get together as one fist. So the French, who was fighting with the British, who was fighting with the Spanish, all came together and agreed on Haiti. We brought about the first bipartisanship. It's still the same way. In the duopoly of Republican and Democrats, imperialism is still the same. Don't matter if it's a demon rat or a Republican. All right. Another story. So 1823, they're fighting at that time, the mulatto who has essentially said that you can't say the name of Jean-Jacques Dessalines, and who is elevating his Eurocentricity, made a deal with the French, because the French was always trying to come back. They brought, like, I think it was like 300 cannons on the shores of Port-au-Prince, and it was an embezzlement. Dessalines was no longer there. Christophe, it was just, divisions and deceit was being thrown at the people. So that's why we have what they call the independence debt. It was a debt that was so onerous. I'll give you the scale of how onerous it was, right? So the French, up until 17, so the revolution started in 1791. We took the part of the Dominican Republic, and like around 1797, there was a treaty called the Treaty of Basel. Okay, we took the entire island there because the French had fought against. We were fighting. Toussaint fought with the French at a certain point to get rid of the Spanish, and then he fought the French to get rid of them. But Haitians today, they have no sense. They keep messing around with these white people instead of playing them against each other. I can tell you right now, if you see anything that I say that sounds confusing, it's intended. It is my job to bring division amongst them. So I had no problem with Trump. So here we go. 1823. You have this independence debt that is, the scale is right after the revolution. Napoleon sells the Louisiana territory to Jefferson, which almost quadrupled the size of the United States. So all you had was the 13 little states, and then they took all that Louisiana territory that used to be owned by the French. Remember the French, when Leclerc came to put Haiti back into slavery, Napoleon sent 20,000 troops to New Orleans because he intended to fight the Americans for that whole territory. But when our grands beat them across the Caribbean, and Rochambeau had to kneel to Jean-Jacques Dessalines to get passage out of there, of which then, you know, the British arrested him and put him in jail for like 9 years. But while all that was going on, Louisiana Territory was sold for 15 million gold francs. 15 million, okay? They made Haiti pay 10 times the amount, that quadrupled the size of the United States. There's just no way we could come back from that. That was back to slavery, right? We paid 10 times the amount that Jefferson paid for the French territory, that quadrupled the number of states, doubled the number of states, quadrupled the size of what the United States was. It was just a little tiny eastern 13 states. And now you have all of this territory. And so we were paying 150 million in gold. They paid 15 million, right? Haiti is not even the size of Delaware, the small state. So that's how awful it was. It took us 122 years for the Haitians to pay. We essentially had to go back to sharecropping, like Black Americans had to do after the Civil War. So we went back to sharecropping essentially because we had to pay a portion of whatever we made to go down to pay the debt. So 122 years. But that wasn't enough for these Mandeles. That was not enough. They kept coming back. The Germans came. Everybody tried to take this island because the idea of a Black ruled independent nation, which was Dessalines' thing, wasn't conceivable based on their education. You know, the academics told them things that made them think that this was just not possible. And then they would meet the Haitians. So the Haitians have been fighting since 1503. The Blacks who became Haitians in the land of the Black Caracals and the Aguinis and the Taínos. There were 21 nations at Bois Caïman, 21 different languages. And there's spiritual things that we say about those 21 nations. And the Vodun ceremonies that happen, we always lift up their flags of all those nations that were disparate. You know how they talk about Pan-Africanism? We are the Pan-Africanists. From the beginning, we have all of these disparate African ethnicities, but no Haitian calls himself Fawn or Senegalian or Nigerian. They called themselves, they became one, Haitien. And so that's what happened to that. It took us so long. I went back to Haiti. I left Haiti as a young child during the Duvalier reign. My father couldn't live there, so he brought us to the United States. And when I returned back to Haiti, I returned as a lawyer for the first democratically elected Haitian president, Jean-Bertrand Aristide. In 2004, he's the first president to ever ask France to return that independence debt. And at that time, it was worth $22 billion.
Enough said, man. Enough said. So, man, Èzili, thank you so much for that piece of history, man. Who needs a textbook when you got Èzili Danto, man? I think that last piece was super important because, you know, people scratch their head like, how can these people just, you know, become what it is now and all this kind of stuff? But that kind of explains it all. And I think listeners, this is definitely something to look back on and replay again, and a substitute for lack of information that we are getting about, you know, the history of us and our culture. And I'm glad that you said a lot of it was passed down verbally, right? So some people might be flipping through their books trying to figure out, what is Èzili talking about? What book is it? A lot of our culture, and this is just African culture itself, is passed down generation from generation verbally, through storytelling. And it's not gonna be in the textbooks. So I think that's important to understand as well. But a whole lot there, whole lot. Thank you so much for that, Èzili. Listeners, questions, comments, you could raise your hand if you feel uncomfortable asking a question. You can type it in the chat and I can ask it for you. So let's get started with that. Professor Robinson, you got anything before we get into everybody's questions? Professor Robinson, you with us?
Hi, how are you? I see my beautiful Sky. Thank you, Sky. Hi, David. That's my brother and my niece.
What's going on, David?
Hey, Sky.
What's good? She should be in her bed, but
I know, right?
All right. Nobody has questions?
ask a question, Scott. Ask a question.
What do you want to know, Sky?
All right. All right. Say good night. Say good night.
Good night.
Bye,
Good
sweetie.
night.
Love you.
All right. We got Mr. Luke Cadet, founder of Bantu Audio, first Black audiobook company. Luke, what we got?
Yeah, merci un peu for the information. It was definitely appreciated. I had a question with all the knowledge that you have, and the wealth of information that you have. We didn't get a chance to dive into the constitutional changes that happened in Haiti, because you mentioned the change, the Constitution of Dessalines, but there was a change in the Constitution when the U.S. invaded Haiti back in 1914, I think it was, early 1900s.
Mhm.
So could you kind of touch on that, kind of, because I don't know if that's been something that's been formally addressed. A lot of people may not even know that history, and even myself may not know the in-depth history of those changes that occurred.
Certainly. So FDR, he was a military person at the time. I forgot his title, admiral or something, doing the United States came into Haiti in 1914. Excuse me, 1914 they came, and the Marines, it wasn't, the occupation hadn't started yet. The Marines carted out Haiti's gold. So if you want to know part of why we're so dependent on the United States, we used to have our own currency, and it was backed by gold. So they carted out Haiti's gold, put it in New York for the Citibank boys of New York, and we've never seen it again. So this is for the next generation of Haitians to do something about. This is, I mean, there's so many different things that they did to us, but Dessalines' law, never again shall a European or a colonist step on this land as master or proprietor. So that meant, this is the 1805 Constitution, that they could not own land in Haiti at all. Okay. What we said, if you were not a Haitian citizen, you could not own land in Haiti. The land belonged to the descendants of the warriors, because we were a tiny little space. right? All around us was in slavery. So, so that's essentially what Dessalines' law is. But FDR came into Haiti, and we have another FDR right now. His name is Kenneth Merton. We have another butcher. FDR was the butcher of Haiti. That's what he was called. You can just look it up. FDR, butcher of Haiti. The butchers of Haiti right now are called the core group of US ambassadors. They're the diplomatic corps who have come in as one fist from all of these various Western nations and their Bretton Woods organizations. If you want to know who is the current manifestation of Rochambeau, Napoleon, and all the other enslavers, they are the representative of the United States, big one, Michel Sisson, Kenneth Merton, the representative of Germany, France, Canada, Spain, never went away. And then you have their, like I said, Bretton Woods organization, that slave making entity, Rockefeller entity called the United Nations, the OAS, and the European Union. They are called the core group. So they control Haiti. And so back then, FDR, when they landed so after they took our gold, they came back in 1915 with arms and Southern racist soldiers who literally put Haitians back into slavery. They had the chain gangs, you know, they used combite in a way that it wasn't supposed to be used to build their roads and so on. They stayed for 19 years. The rape of Haitian women was just as bad as it was now with the UN and their soldiers. So essentially, they dissolved the Haitian parliament, went in there, and FDR rewrote the Haitian constitution, literally rewrote the Haitian constitution. It was rewritten and the first thing they did was get rid of the prohibition against foreigners and white people owning land in Haiti. And we had the indigenous army up until then. They converted it all into their own weapon. So the Haitian army became a tool of empire. And then by 1957, a man by the name of Duvalier wanted to counter the Haitian army, who was a tool of empire. He did it by creating a paramilitary group called the Tonton Macoutes. That paradigm continues right now. We don't have the Tonton Macoutes, we have what they call the gangs, which are just paramilitary gangs of empire or petty politicians. And that's the story.
Thank you for that, Èzili. Other questions? Other questions? All right, we got Professor Daniels. Professor Daniels.
You got unmute.
Okay, now, all right. Right now, those gangs in Haiti, who's funding them? Who's supplying them? You know, how are they being controlled?
Okay, so remember I was telling you before that before Haiti, before the Americas enslavement, there was the Arab enslavements, right? Well, along the way in the 1900s, the United States brought in the experts, the ones who've been enslaving us in Africa for centuries. Syrians, Lebanese, they are a white oxymoron, Haitians. They own 98% of Haiti's wealth. They have privatized most of Haiti's economy. We gave them asylum when they were running away from the fall of the Ottoman Empire, and the United States used them as their tool and uses them to bring in, because they own the ports, to bring in arms from Israel. And that's what we have. They bring arms from Israel, some from the United States. Haitians do not manufacture arms, and they give it to hungry, uneducated, without any geopolitical knowledge Haitians, who then patrol their ports for them. And in exchange, they let them patrol and keep certain ghetto areas. Part of it is in order to stop certain politicians from coming to power that might have the interests of the people in mind. So I remember back when I first represented Aristide, I saw that was about to happen because I had studied Jamaica. Because that's how it works in Jamaica, except it's normalized. But since they still don't control Haiti, they have not normalized it, and they make as if, they got to come in and this is violent, violent, violent. Well, there is more gangs and murder in Jamaica than there ever was in Haiti. Ever. But they don't own our land the way they own Jamaica.
Gotcha.
So they are demonizing in order to come back and take what they don't have. Haitians own more land than anyone else in the Caribbean, but nobody tells that to Haitians. They're all running away to go find, bling, right? And then they're all gonna be sent back in humiliation, and their lands are gone because some Bill Gates or Bill Clinton took it. Because they do fake elections to bring in the men in pink. Remember, if you want to know some of my work, one of the biggest ones when I came to Haiti is something I didn't expect to do. I ended up representing children who were being sexually abused in these fake orphanages, and it's weaponized charity. And the Catholic Church has been using that tool. Remember, every activity, including sex, is a tool of bringing in the Stockholm syndrome. So trauma and Mateli, these schools, a lot of these young people were abused. And then their minds go and they become so Eurocentric. I think Paola Freire says it's victims making victims.
Can you also, the assassination of the president of Haiti, what was that all about?
Oh my goodness. Thank you for asking. You're never going to hear this anywhere else. And this is why you don't hear my voice anywhere, because they don't want to see it, Even though Jovenel Moïse was a men in pink created and put into Haiti by Michel Mateli, who under Obama and Biden, after the earthquake, they used that shock to put in someone who had no experience, but who was a celebrity, right? Like, America uses any tool that it has for the oligarchs to control. So you have Mateli, unelected American citizen, Mateli, became president under Obama after the earthquake in order to sign away Haiti's islands by decree. He had no parliament. They let him do that, right? Because the Americans are not about democracy. Even that's what they announced to everybody. They're about dictatorship, because they just need one person to sign off our assets, our iridium, our oil, and Mateli did all that. But we actually had a parliament, even though they were a bunch of DEA dossiered drug dealers, they did not sign off on Mateli's giving away, for instance, a contract to get our gold and our oil. That's the fight right now. When they tell you that there's a whole bunch of Haitians after the assassination and they want a unity of accord, they really just want to bring in the Haitians they have dossiers on, right? That pattern goes all over the ghetto in America. You know that since the civil rights movement, right? Remember how those that Black collaborators they have dossiers on, they used to destroy, whether it was, you know, Hampton or all of us. Okay, it's the same pattern, and we try to explain to Black people it's the same pattern. But Èzili.com is my website, and when that assassination occurred, I said, here is why he was killed. And I'm going to say it again now. 10 years from now, some white person is going to say it, and then Black people will believe it. All right. He was killed by the United States and his own party, political party, by the Black collaborators. They allowed it or orchestrated his killing. The question is why? Because a month before he went to Russia, a month before he went to Turkey. Remember, Turkey and Israel are not friends. Okay? Turkey is standing with Syria and Aleppo, those Lebanese that, right? They use our ports to bring in drugs into the United States for the CIA to fight their wars in the Middle East. And here's this guy, even though he was not elected by the population and he was only supposed to be a puppet, but at a certain point, he realized that they had an indictment for drugs on him, because before he became president, Jovenel Moïse was an indicted drug money launderer. The United States still put him in office because they only put in office people who they have dossiers on. Because remember, the Colombians have all this drug the United States is bringing in to destroy the Black community in America. They use our ports, okay? And they train those Colombians. There's just no way there was like, was it 28 Colombians, 18 Colombians that came to the United States as mercenaries, Haiti as mercenaries. All right, remember, Colombia is a U.S. client state. Those people were U.S. assets. The reason they killed him is this. It's a message to other Haitians who might want to try to figure out a way to break the geopolitical stalemate where Haiti is trapped. So I always say it, a little tired of saying it, but I'll say it again. We are Cuba, Venezuela, and Haiti is right in the middle. Okay, what is that? Russia. Eurasians are still having their wars, but they have agreed. Now I can't prove it, but I know it. They have agreed essentially to hold Haiti right there. Because remember, Haiti is free. There's a domino effect. There was one before. Okay. And the biggest problem they have is Africa being free. Haiti frees, Africa frees. Africa is whatever, 4 times the size of India, 4 times the size of you can take India, you can take China, you can take the whole of Western Europe, and you still have more room in Africa. You put them in, right? Because they lie to you and show you Africa is so small, right? And they want to depopulate us, I always say, but India has 2 million people, 2 billion people.
2 billion, yeah.
China, more than 2 billion, right? But it's us with 54 nation in one continent that's of just about 2 billion that they want to depopulate. So my answer is that at the end of his term, Jovenel Moïse accepted the credentials of the Russian ambassador in Venezuela to Haiti. You know, they had 2 cats and a dog, right? That was their man. Okay? They were fighting, you know, they always fighting Maduro, right? Before that, Chavez, right?
Yeah.
And doing everything to unseat them. And those 2 countries, Russia, Cuba and Venezuela, would have been ran over by CIA jackals if Russia wasn't in those waters giving them intelligence.
Yeah.
Well, that same Russia was in those waters. It saw what happened. It knew that as soon as Jovenel Moïse accepted the credentials of a communist into Haiti, he was dead. But they're not going to protect him. They let the United States kill him.
Yeah.
What else happened? A month before Jovenel Moïse went to was assassinated, he took a trip to Turkey, and he made a deal with Turkey that the United States did not like, and that the Haitian oligarchy, remember, right? They're fighting in Aleppo, right, for their fathers and mothers. The biggest oligarchs, no, let me just say it the other way. The richest people in the Caribbean are the Haiti oligarchs.
Wow.
And the richest one, his name is Bijou. Look it up. Okay, this is
Spell that.
Bijou, Bigio, Gilbert Bijou. Okay, Gilbert Bijou is from Aleppo in Syria. Okay, he has been working for the United States by doing like these oligarchs. Why don't I share my screen, show you their faces? These oligarchs are US assets that are in Haiti as middlemen, the sort of like Black collaborators, the middlemen that the United States uses so that, you know, it doesn't have to, you know, show its hand. So yeah, so Bijou from Aleppo has something called Port Lafito. In 2004, the reason they got rid of Aristide was because the top oligarchs were fighting each other. The Murr family, which had their private port, and all of the others had to go through his port. Well, they decided to get rid of Aristide, who was trying to get a little bit of the economics for the masses. The United States allowed them to do that, and then allowed Bijou, who was always helping them with their arms, with their wars in the Middle East, like I said, with Turkey and Syria, Iran, you know. That's what these men do, the Haitian oligarchs. And so here they are. So in a country of 90% African, these men own 98% of the economy, and you don't see them anywhere. And I like to let you all know that I've had 6 assassination attempts. My voice, they do not want you to hear. So you see Sheriff Abdullah, Reginald Boulos, Greg Mervs, Brant. This is Gilbert Bijou right here. He is the billionaire. He is the richest amongst these billionaires in the Caribbean. He has assets. He also has assets everywhere, Dominican Republic and Jamaica and so forth. Okay, those are the ones. See, you see these Haitians, like fighting for like being president. I remember sitting with Aristide and it's like, who would fight for this when 80% of your budget is coming from foreigners and oligarchs who's you've got to be a patron for? So these are the billionaires of the Caribbean: Arab, Syrian, Lebanese. They were given asylum. You know, Haiti gives asylum to people fleeing persecution. It's part of our 1805 Constitution. We said that if you're Black and you set your foot on Haiti in 1804 to now, you are free and a citizen. If you're white and you're running away from oppression, we will give you asylum. And we gave asylum to the Israelis when America wouldn't even take them. And then they became, because of what do you call that thing? Colorism. They became the bane of our existence. So immigration is definitely used to do all of that. The two women here, Michelle Sisson and Ellen Lalume of the UN, they control the core group right now. Here is a picture of the core gang. All these countries I already told you about. And this is the assassinated president. These men run Haiti. And I know this because in December 2003, right before the coup d'etat, I was in Haiti to celebrate the bicentennial of Haiti. And I knew then that the United States was definitely going to try to take down Aristide. And I went to him and I said, they're going to take you down. Here's what's happening. But in that space, I happened to be in a place where the OAS representative, Luigi Enualdi, his name was, ugly looking, fat, slobberish man. He was drunk as you could be. And he said, we were down in the front desk. At that time, Aristide was still president and they were planning his destruction. And, you know, they always think I'm part of them because, you know, the unwashed Black masses don't, you know, wouldn't be at that hotel. So he said that the problem at that time, he was talking about the international community, the one I just told you, core group. They hadn't gotten their stuff together yet. And he said, the problem with the international community is that they're letting Haitians run Haiti. And I wrote it down. Yes. And I had this blog at that time. And I said, this, you know, and they have that mindset. The idea of Black people running a nation scares them, is against their Superman, Tarzan mentality. And so they had to get rid of Aristide. In February 29th, 2004, they kidnapped him like France kidnapped Toussaint Louverture and deported him to Africa. Yep. I hope I answered your question.
Oh my goodness, yes you did. Now which leads to another question about Haiti's historical relationship with the Dominican Republic. Do you see any difference there in the future?
No. The Dominican Republic is like the South winning and then being at the border of a Black nation. Right?
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's there to contain us in poverty. So I do meet some Dominicans. They think they're better than Haitians when they're in, you know, in the Dominican Republic, but some, when they get to America and let's say they're a little darker, they're going to be treated like a Black person. Then they start trying to figure out what their Haitian heritage is, because the whole island was Haitian. But today they, you know, they're into all kinds of things, you know, even what the Nigerians are into, you know. You saw that guy, Sosa, Sammy Sosa.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
right,
yeah.
right. I know what you're talking about. Yes,
Skin bleaching. Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
you know,
yes.
that's, you know, they and during the first Haitian occupation by the United States, right? Why did they do it? Because of the Monroe Doctrine, right? The United States told the other Europeans, get out. This is my backyard. And then they enforced it with gunboat diplomacy back in the, 1915 to 1934 under FDR. The one that, mythologically, when you read, when I was a history major, he was supposed to be such a great president with the, what was that plan that he had? Was it the Marshall Plan?
No, oh my
Did
God.
all the social
Is that the
programs.
New
Right,
Deal or
right.
something?
The New
Who?
Deal.
The New
Sorry,
Deal. Yes, yes,
Sorry.
yes.
Okay, so I learned to, he was great, whatever. And then when I learned my real history, I found out how he did not treat Black people in America the same way with regards to his New Deal. But you won't learn all that in history, in American.
Of course not.
Okay, so it's the same. It's the same thing. So you have Dominican Republic. Remember, you have to go back to before 1491. Where did the Hispanics come from? Right?
Mhm.
Remember, I told you. So they have this nightmare because for 700 years they were conquered by the Moors.
That's right.
So they have this nightmare that's in their blood of the Black hordes.
Yeah.
And that is being relived right there in Haiti.
Yeah.
You understand? So the Dominican order, I mean, that goes way out. I mean, this guy was, they're very Catholic.
Mhm.
You understand? And these people are all about I don't know, they're you remember who Hitler was, right? You know who the Germans are, right?
Yep. Yep.
Nobody connects them, but they're Catholics, right? The
Ah,
Pope, right?
yeah.
White supremacy. They don't make you connect it. When the Jews are telling the story, they don't really tell you what the Pope's part was with Hitler and the Germans.
Yeah.
You understand? So you
Yeah.
have to tell your story. That's the story that's in IT right now. If they could, they're actually pushing to take over IT. They thought that they would do it. It was an earthquake that they used before in 1842. Now, there's a lot of doom and gloom happening in IT right now because we are on, remember I told you about those fault lines? We are
Yeah.
on two big fault lines. Okay. There's one that's due to go any day. It's in the north. It went some 200 years ago in 1842 and killed half the population in the south in Haiti, in the north, half the population. Okay. But it was that chaos that created Dominican Republic.
Yeah.
It was that chaos. Dominican Republic did not come into being until 1844, 2 years after that major earthquake. Because before, there are two things that help create the Dominican Republic. Free Haiti says so. You can write it down and quote me. Two things. One, you have to remember the history of how in 1492, it was the fall of Grenada. How the Hispanics still had in their heads the 700 years of conquest, that they're scared of the Black blood. Okay, one. Then you have to understand that after we won our independence, when we were one nation, Haiti, the whole island, right? So when Boyer signed for that independence debt, whatever division that the white Jesuits and all those people were doing already everywhere in Haiti, it intensified and sort of like reasonably so, because why should the Hispanic side have to pay the independence debt to the French because they didn't own it. So it's like, why do I have to pay this debt? Do you understand?
Yes.
So that whatever contention all came together after the earthquake, and then eventually the Europeans negotiated amongst themselves and they lowered the independence debt after they declared that side of the island was no longer Haiti. They lowered the independence debt from 150 million francs to 90 million francs. And then that side didn't have to pay anymore. It became free.
Mm.
But the fact that Boyer had signed for the entire island because we were Haiti, so he was requiring every citizen to participate. Well, the citizen that still belonged or had belonged to the Spanish were pissed. And the United States and the Spanish and the British, they all pushed that contention. And the Haiti was suffering from that 1842 earthquake when the United States helped them. You know how they just declared there's a South Sudan all of a sudden? Well, they just declared.
Yeah.
They just declared there's another, and the people on the ground in Dominican Republic didn't even know until they sent them the news that there was and then they all, of course, agreed because they got advantages, right? They got advantages. So that's the story of the Dominican Republic. I can tell you as a lawyer, the stuff that they do to Haitian has no legal basis. The most egregious under Obama in 2013, the Dominicans changed their constitution and essentially made apartheid legal in the Western Hemisphere, and nobody said anything. They denationalized every Haitian going back.
Yes, they did.
1937. That means what happened in 1937? Do you guys remember Trujillo and the massacre of the Haitians? So it's about whitening that space. However, Haitians are the laborers in the Dominican Republic. They are the construction workers. They are the sugar plantation folks. They're the ones. And Dominican Republic makes about 2 billion, in excess of 2 billion a year, selling us awful produce and food stuff. Without that, Dominican wouldn't exist. As a matter of fact, what people don't understand in terms of scale, how terrorizing Jamaica is for us. So we own the most lands, right, in the Caribbean. We have our own culture. We are totally different from most of the 15 Caribbean nations. In order for the United States to maintain Dominican Republic, they have to keep the people in silence. The last time there was any sort of Dominican revolution, sort of 1963, the United States squashed it, right? Okay, so Dominicans have to take a boat to Puerto Rico and try to pass as Puerto Ricans to come to the United States.
Oh.
That's what they do. Okay, the others have become what Cuba was trying to stop in Cuba. Remember all the gangsters used to go to Cuba and they were making it a brothel for the Cuban women?
Yes.
That was one of the things that Cuba, well, that's what white culture is about. Okay. Unfortunately, what you hear about Dominican Republic is that it's developed and Haiti isn't. And stupid Haitian intellectuals repeat that. Okay, but you won't hear it from me. What I'll tell you is the Spanish human trafficked about 1,000 Dominican women a month to Spain to be sex slaves.
Wow.
Look it up. Dominican women are the 4th most trafficked women in the world. And this is what they call development. And this is where they want Haiti to go. And this is what under Obama and Biden, we have the men in pink, and that's where they're going. I have never seen that many sexual workers in Haiti ever. As a matter of fact, in 94, when I first went to Haiti, the prostitutes were not Haitian. They were Dominicans.
Yeah.
They were Dominicans, but they're better than us though. Because why? Because of the same thing, because of black males and the Kardashians. Because all you have to do. Hey, I'm not going there. I'm not going there. But you know exactly what I'm talking about. That's why North Africa is what it is today.
Yeah, as you know, you're saying these things, Èzili. I know people are like, man, this is what she, talking about here. Like, this stuff is not serious. I want people to understand that, you are a human rights attorney. You can't just say anything like and not have evidence of what you're saying. For people that challenge some of the things that you're talking about, it is not without obviously you speaking to certain people and you having that evidence legally to be able to even say it. So I just want people to think about that, because I think sometimes when we speak some truth, we always think about, well, this is like conspiracy stuff. This ain't really what's happening. You know what I mean? Like she's into this whole conspiracy type of thing, but you can't just say anything being in the position that you're in. You know what I mean? So I think, we should definitely.
I wish they would sue me. The truth, the truth is 100% defense. I wish, but they won't. Why? Because it would get publicity and I would get publicity, and that's not what they want. You remember they did the same thing with Malcolm. Once Malcolm they didn't realize that their salacious press was going to help with showing the Black struggle with Malcolm. When Malcolm was over, the only people they allowed to have media coverage is their Black collaborators. That's it. They're not going to use their media for me ever. So that's why we have the Èzili Network. That's why we have, that song, God Bless the Child. Who had her own. Yes.
All right. So as we wrap up, Èzili, man, thank you so much just for the wealth of information that you have given us today on just everything Haiti. As we wrap up, do you want to leave us with any final words before we go?
Yes, please. So thank you so much for having me. And I'm hoping that I'll have this to put out. So at some point, yes. I want to thank your audience for supporting you. There's a lot of things happening right now. And we're like right in the thick of it, because I've been here for so long, like I told you guys, right? Was it 28 years? 1994 was the first time I went to Haiti. I've grown old in this fight, right? Because we fight from one generation to the other. Mm-hmm. If any of you got any new information, remember what I said, I challenge everyone to go look up everything I've said. And in the 28 years I've been saying some of these things, nobody's ever come back at me, ever, because I give you the receipts. I mean, they're there, right? You can't say you don't know. But there's something called cognitive dissonance. Mm-hmm. You see? So because of that, I always say, I know that certain people will never have the capacity to take and absorb something that's so different than what they were conditioned with. So all I'm asking is that those of you who are not conditioned, who can absorb what I'm saying and not go crazy, please, if you want to support us, we have EziliDental.com. We have tons of free Haiti movement presentations where I go specifically for Wakaima or specifically with the operate, and I'm a performance poet. The only way I am able to release, because I'm telling you, a Black person is coming into a spiritual quadrant, a spiritual, the whole energy is not our energy. And in order to release from that, you have to understand that you have to come from a place of power and not a place of crisis, because they put us constantly in a place of crisis. So especially Haitians, never reproduce the crisis without coming from a place of power, right? And this is what I always say, Guinée posé, we've already won. I don't care, they can stand up and lever tête frapper la terre. I have no idea how to say that in English. I mean, take
their heads and slam it on the ground.
Yeah, they can take their heads and slam it on the ground. We've already won. We are the parents of the universe. The ancestors are here. What's inside of us is powerful. And frankly, I don't mind putting them in their Oculus, leaving him in there, and let us continue to go live. Whatever you do, wherever you are, I don't care if it's prison, you got to live, because it is from living that you create. And it is from the creation that you have tomorrow. The ancestors, when I saw what was happening in Haiti, I made a call. They gave me red, black, and moonlight. Those are my pieces. I've done tons of plays, but moonlight, people, remember Makeba, the Queen of Sheba? She was daughter of the moon. Remember how important moonlight is. It is tomorrow's light. It is the sun, the sunlight, but what you're seeing is tomorrow's light. So tomorrow's light, people, the ancestors gave me that message years ago. No matter what I see, tomorrow's light is where we reign. Remember that.
Well said. Well
Honor
said.
and respect. Go to my website, Èzili Dantar. But just put Èzili Dantar lawyer, Èzili Dantar Free Haiti movement. We have a page there. There's a platform there, but people put things that, it's a platform for everybody. But if you want to know our work, our systematic work, go to the album sections of each of my pages. Okay, album sections. Okay. Go to my archive sites if you want to know anything. I've been here for a long time, and we've got years and years and years of, it's for you. Thank you, Pascal.
Yes. Thank you, man. And for all of us listening in, I think that, sometimes we don't want to support those of us that are fighting and doing the work for us. And even when we look at, Malcolm X, a lot of, Black people stayed away from Malcolm X. He was saying too much. He was, too revolutionary and all this kind of stuff. And then when he passed, when it was safe, then we got back. We got to support the people that are like on the front lines fighting for us. You know what I'm saying? And
be nice. It would be nice. Please.
Yes,
I have this logo. I don't know if you guys have seen some of my logos. Use it on your social media pages. Let them know Free Haiti exists. Libérez Haïti. It's the maroon man, and the heart, which Èzili Dantar's Veve, her hieroglyphic is a heart with a dagger, and you know what that means. I don't have to explain that. For the Black woman, the heart with the dagger, that's her hieroglyphic. And then you have, that's my logo. And I would love to see, if you do anything, put it on your page one day, put it out in Twitter, because we are calling the ancestors. So do your part.
Indeed. Yes. We got to do our parts. Just as I was saying, we have to support folks that are fighting for us. Èzili just told you she had 6 assassination attempts, and she's fighting for us. She's putting herself in danger to give us truth, knowledge, and information. And it's the reason today that she was able to tell our story, from talking to Haitian people on the front line, from doing her own research, She said she was a historian before, so all of this is work that she's done for us. So definitely support the Èzili Danto Network, support the Free Haiti movement, support Black folks, support Black business, and listeners. Also, when we think about the Haitian Revolution, all right, let's remember to have the spirit of Boukman, Dessalines, Toussaint, and the warriors of the revolution. They all live inside of us.
Mhm.
All right. When any Black person in the world thinks about the revolution, they should hold their heads up high and remember that once upon a time, there was a nation of Black people that stood up to white supremacy and fought for us and died for us. All right. So we can honor them by continuing to fight and to take back our minds. That's the number one important thing that we should be taking back right now, reclaiming, like Èzili said, our minds. And to remember, of course, as we say, your mind is the most powerful tool in the universe. Therefore, if you can think it, you can do it. If you believe in it, you can be it. And if you fight for it, you can have it. The world is yours. This has been your host, Mr. G, and I will see you next time on Mastermind. All right. Èzili, thank you. Thank you. Luke, if you're still around, man, stick around. Èzili, if you could stick around for 1-2 seconds. Kind of wanted to introduce you to Luke real quick. Luke was the one I told you about that has his audiobook company. Luke, you still here?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Yes, sir. So just doing the introductions here.